What's up, guys, and welcome to another Neo Vintage Spoilercast. This time for Ghost of Tsushima. It has been a while. We skipped a little exclusive, but we're back here with a new Sucker Punch game. So, Steve, how you doing?
Good. I can't wait to talk about this. I haven't talked to too many people about it. I really only have you and one other friend who played Ghost of Tsushima, so I just can't wait to just go all in about this game.
Yeah, for sure. So we have 4 segments, kind of like normal, but I'm going to break it down for you guys. So on the front end of the show, we're going to do spoiler-free thoughts, and everything will be timestamped down below. So if you don't want any spoilers and you want our general thoughts about the game, you just watch the front end of this podcast, and we'll let you know clearly when the spoilers will begin, and you can get out of here. Then we'll go on our gameplay thoughts, our narrative thoughts, and then we're going to go about our thoughts in context as a Sony exclusive, where it fits in as a generational release, and where it fits in with 2020 releases. So I guess we can jump right into our spoiler-free thoughts. So top level, Steve, what did you think about this game?
What a fantastic game and just like breath of fresh air I had with this. Now I have lots of respect, and I've played Sucker Punch's games, all the Infamous trilogy, and I call it trilogy, whether you consider the PS4 one. And I knew they were up to the task. Open world things are something they're aware of. Now, when I heard they were, going Japan, I was like, oof, how do you do this? I'm like, but I feel like, I remember all the studies and all the trips they took to like Seattle to do Second Son.
Yeah.
And then they were starting to really reveal the research and the liberties they were willing to take and things they were willing to change for Ghost, and it worked out so well. When people ask me like, oh, what's a good game to play, this game just fit and hit a spot so good that other games weren't just doing it for me. Like, this year's been like such big heavy hitters and big in almost an experience way. Like, The Last of Us was an experience. Final Fantasy VII was a nostalgic trip, but also was more about the experience you have. Ghost of Tsushima was always being, at least to me, told as like, this is a super fun game we wanted to make for you guys, and they just nailed it. They nailed it beyond what I expected. I expected a good game. This is like an amazing game, and the big key word for me is that it's a game. It's not this huge experience where like Hellblade is more of a experience you take in, and there is combat in that, obviously, and that's a whole different discussion. But when I go to Ghost, I just love doing everything in this game. It's been a long time since I've been like, I want to do everything in this game, and I don't feel pressured to. I don't feel forced to. I don't feel like it's a grind. I don't feel like it's just pushing my character's numbers higher so I don't get one-shotted by other characters. It's all just such a natural feeling and a natural progression we got in Ghost of Tsushima, and it left me wanting more. I always wanted to keep playing. I beat it, last night from when we were recording this, and immediately I was like, I went in to get more, Fox shrines and get more of the cosmetics and get more of the, more parkour shrines I needed to get. So when I have to wrap it up, it's just an amazing game. This is one of my favorite games of all time, easily. It just knocked things down on my list where I'm like, I would play this again for sure. I know there's no new game plus mode yet. I was like, I would play this again from the get-go. I don't see why not. So you and I haven't really talked too much about it, but what are your thoughts? What were your just feelings about the game?
Yeah, so I thought Sucker Punch killed it with this one. And I gotta say that going into it, I'm a big fan of Japan and media surrounding Japan. But I was apprehensive about this game. What I do know about Sucker Punch is that they're very obsessive with their prep when it comes to their games. And so that gave me a lot of faith in their ability. I thought the combat was going to be solid. But some of the presentation around this game, when they first announced it and started showing it off, made it seem a little obtuse. When they started talking about the UI and you're going to be following the wind, I was like, okay, I don't know. It seemed a little artsy, a little obtuse. But I would say to anybody who's apprehensive about jumping into this game, don't let that scare you off. Believe me, the gameplay loop is super addictive. It's fairly accessible. I think it's demanding in its own right, and it requires you pay attention. This is by no means like a slasher, but at the same time, once you really settle in and understand what they're asking of you, you can have so much fun. And it has a perfect balance between ticking off, check mark on a list, and at the same time exploring a world and finding creative things and cool things that they peppered into the world, and the way they kind of incorporate tales and stuff like that into the world at the same time. It's basically the best, tale or mission integration that I've seen into a game probably since Red Dead, personally, in terms of just navigating the world as you come across things, and next thing you know, oh, there's a mission, and it's seamlessly integrated into it. Yeah, I think Red Dead did a great job with that, and I think this one does a great job too. So I would say if any of the visuals or some of the presentational stuff about this game has you a little bit apprehensive, I would say that this game has a lot to love and is pretty much as deep as you would like it to be. If you really want to get deep into the lore, there's lots of there for you, especially once you go into the side material and the side missions. But at the same time, if you would like to play this almost like a Ubisoft-esque game and kind of just take down encampments, you can do that too. So it kind of your mileage may vary depending on how you choose to approach this game. But yeah, I think they absolutely killed it. It was definitely one of the lower key titles at one point where people were obviously obsessed about what Last of Us was going to be. And this was kind of tacked on as a thing a month later. And everybody was like, oh, we'll see Ghost. They're not talking about it too much. Do they not have faith in it? They're delaying it. Is it going to be good? We don't know. They're sending this game out to die, putting it next to Last of Us. Lo and behold, I mean, I think in many ways, to some people, this may be the superior game. But yeah, that's generally my spoiler-free thoughts. I gotta say, they killed it, and go get this game, period. If you're gonna get one game this year, get this game.
Oh, absolutely. I don't see why, even if you're not into that, maybe even Japan's style, like that lore, the world, the myths, the everything about that world and that culture, this game is just still on a baseline fantastic to do. The world is great to explore, like you said. The side missions feel more alive than most other games. Like, I'm so used to, I love the Ubisoft like Far Cry games and Assassin's Creed, this game has always been constantly compared to Assassin's Creed because Ubisoft for some reason was always delaying to go to Japan.
Yeah.
And this did so much better than I thought it would. I thought it would always feel like a sort of ripoff of Assassin's Creed, and this did things better than I've seen in some Assassin's Creed games. Things, the combat is a little bit more solid in a sense. Not that I have any issues with the way Assassin's Creed is rolled, but as a base level game, as just a game, if you just want a good game, a great game actually, let me take that back, a great game, it's there. You're gonna enjoy this game. The options are in there, if you're not super into the difficulties and stuff like that. Like, this isn't like Sekiro or any of those games where it's going to be grueling. Like, there's options in there. That's something that all, Sony first parties have been really, really showcasing, like audio visuals, or you can specifically do some certain sliders, the difficulty, and you're going to get the hang of it. It was jarring at first. It may feel jarring at first, but something clicks, and it's just a great experience to have.
Yeah, and the good thing about the difficulty that you mentioned, a lot of people obviously who are kind of just look at this game on the surface, they're like, oh, is it one of those like Sekiro type games? I have to say, the game is demanding, yes, but is by no means even remotely close to Souls-like difficulty at all.
Yeah, no.
I would say it demands that you pay attention. That's how I've always said it when I've talked about this game. You have to pay attention. This is not you tap square throughout the whole thing and, hey, if you dodge roll here and there, you'll be good to go. No, they'll block the hell out of you and you'll be dead real fast if you're not paying attention. However, once you understand your stances, once you understand who you're fighting against and the pace at which to approach them, and you've done your due diligence in upgrading your character to the best of your ability, if you're paying attention, you'll be fine. Across the board, front to back of the game. There are spikes when you go to certain areas of the map that we'll get into later once we get into spoiler territory. There are pretty significant jumps in terms of difficulty in that regard, but it never sneaks up on you at all. They make it abundantly clear, like, hey, new area, get your big boy pants on. You're about to have to saddle in and get ready. And yeah, these first few fights might kick your butt a little bit, but generally speaking, don't let the difficulty turn you off. You can crank that all the way down, and all you really need to know is how to attend to different enemies, and you'll be good to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also would say don't let this... Because one of the things I saw early on was everyone about the lock-on mechanic, and I know that's a little bit more into the gameplay, but don't let that, there's no lock-on mechanic, it's a mess, and I'm like, it. Don't get me wrong. I initially was clicking sticks because I just thought my brain was trained for that, where I would click one of the sticks and I would lock on. And I know Sucker Punch has been saying this from the get-go. They're like, no, we designed it specifically in a certain way. Don't let that small factor that some people really were pushing. There's no lock-on mechanic and it's sloppy. The combat is not sloppy. That's one thing for sure. It is not sloppy under any circumstances.
Yeah, they pace the combat accordingly. So, you're not going to be able to snap to enemy to enemy to enemy. However, they pace it accordingly, and they when you're, for example, and not to get into spoilers, but they'll throw like a group at you. You take care of one person. There's generally kind of a waiting period. It gives you time to think, generally speaking. Yeah. Not to mention there are slowdown mechanics and stuff like that when you're shifting around different mechanisms that give you more than enough time to, look at your environment and make sure you can address it accordingly. Yeah, so don't worry about the difficulty. Don't worry about some of the combat mechanics. It is by no means as obtuse as you might think it is. It's fairly accessible. It's arcadey at times, but not DMC arcadey. So if you're not really into that kind of thing, this got something. It does have weight to it as well. So yeah, generally get this game. I think we can both say pretty definitively get this game if you are kind of on the fence about it. Absolutely. So I guess we can jump into spoiler territory here now. So anybody who has not played the game, I'm going to have to ask you to get out of here, go play this game. And now we're going to be talking into spoilers. We're going to get into gameplay. So there's kind of two approaches you can have with gameplay, which is the combat itself and the way the character feels and the way you go about the world, and then the general loop as a whole. So, Steve, in terms of the way the game plays, we've already kind of lightly, touched it. But what is your feeling about gameplay, and especially how it compares to other games that maybe you liked a lot or disliked a lot?
So, like I was saying earlier, when you see the way the game goes from like trailers, and I stayed away from a lot of trailers till about the day of when I had it all preloaded. You can't help but be like, well, what does it do that other open worlds do better, do worse, and you got to start comparing it. And that's the human nature of us. We've played so many open world games by this time. You can't help but be like, well, let's see what it's got. Now this, I don't even know how to explain it. So it's just all naturally comes to you almost. So one of the first things I compared was, what is it like to go around the map? What is it to go from point A to point B to point A to point B? Because that's what some of these games kind of end up doing. Like a lot of Ubisoft games, you climb a tower, activate everything on the map, and then you can go pick them off one by one. So when I saw that Ghost was really not going to do that, when they were like, listen, it's not going to be just running around collecting, spots to unlock other spots When it's like, listen, you're going to get all these different audio cues, visual cues, the wind mechanic that's going to, travel, show you where to travel. I was like, this is not how open world games are. This is not how it is. Not that I wanted this huge yellow line showing me where to walk, but it's like, that's what we're used to. That's what, even into like Red Dead Redemption 2, which was a great comparison, was pretty much, you can auto run it. With Ghost, it just always keeps you engaged, because while you're, alright, this is where I'm going, this is where the wind is taking me, here's the little yellow bird. And I know everyone's seen that. The little yellow bird. Oh, let me see where this takes. And that ends up taking you to, let's say, a fox den. And then that takes you over into... And then you discover something even closer to that. You find a village you need. And the village needs to give you a mission to help. They need someone found. They need someone killed. They heard a rumor about supplies, armor, weapons, anything that's there. So the fact is that this game is constantly asking you to keep engaged. When other games push you to, go here because we want you to do something. Go to this section because we want you to do something. And that was a big problem I found in Assassin's Creed, where there was times where it just almost felt like they were just telling you to go somewhere because they wanted you to go somewhere. Where for Ghost, in its gameplay and its almost loop, it's just constantly just pulling you in and just really immersing you in the world to keep your eyes on the screen, to keep your eyes following every little audio cue, from the birds to a random fox to certain fireflies. Just even though it may just look like a gorgeous backdrop, the fireflies are signifying that there's something maybe there, something may be hidden. And it just took things that we were used to and just really decided to give it to us in a different format, and also one that felt true to the culture, if that makes sense. Because, as you were saying, I'm also a big fan of like the feudal Japan and this era and old movies and the 50s and 60s, those crazy over the top samurai movies and stuff like that. And a lot of the stuff fits in so well. So the fact that they were able to find this balance between making a fun game and taking certain liberties on armor and styles and some of the myths that fall in this world, and pure gameplay and what's fun and what's awesome to do, they were able to find this balance that some games won't give you. Some games want to give you just over the top scenes and that's it, and then get to the next over the top scene or get to the next small discussion. And in Ghost, somehow they were just able to really nail every moment to moment was something awesome to watch, something awesome to do, something awesome to discuss about. Like, I could literally think of any hour I was playing that game and I could have a huge discussion about whether how great it looked, how awesome it was to do, what it made you think it was awesome, trying to get you to find. And that's just something that you don't see often now, where it's like, what is the game trying to tell me? Instead of the game telling me, climb this and I'll tell you where to go. And that was a real, just refreshing thing to see when I was really starting to feel bogged down by these giant open world games. Ghost almost sometimes doesn't feel like that, and I don't think it's technically supposed to, in my opinion. So on the gameplays and all that kind of stuff, before I discuss combat, what was some of your ideas and feelings about it?
Yeah, so, I gotta commend them on them. This game does one of the better jobs of, for example, incentivizing exploration, for example. Everything you encounter has a significance and has a purpose and encourages exploration even more. The shrines are incredibly interesting in navigating them, and environmental puzzles that are really interesting that we've seen from other, third-person navigation things like the Tomb Raiders and the Uncharted. They do a great job on this one, doing different environmental puzzles to get to the shrines, for example. Especially once you have your hook mechanism, I think that does that makes it really, really fun. The fox dens are really fun. Love the foxes, very cute. They have the little, I forget what they call them, but the spas basically that increase your health.
Yeah, the springs.
And also at the same time gives you a chance to reflect, and gives you little peers into Jin's story, which again, when we cover the narrative, we can get deeper into that. But everything has context and everything has weight, whether cultural or lending itself to the narrative, that I think is very clever. Because it on a lot of other open world games, when you go from place to place, it'll give you a little ding on the screen like, hey, you just arrived at this area, and then that's just kind of it. And maybe you have some different some items that you can collect in that area, but generally speaking, it's just a new area, and maybe they have new missions and stuff like that. But here, you actually are instantly rewarded with something. You can find either a new coloration for your sword or something like that, or you can find a place that buffs your character and makes them stronger. So everything is rewarded, everything's incentivized, and everything's diverse enough to make it not feel like you're seeing the same stuff over and over and over and over again. And yeah, maybe if you get to the end of the game and you didn't do a ton of exploring, maybe at that point you've encountered your 16th fox den in a row, and then maybe you feel like it gets a little repetitive. But if you do it in a more organic way, as they intended to, when you're going from mission to mission encountering things, I think they did a fantastic job laying things out in a very effective way to make you pretty much touch every section of the map and still not feel like you've been riding on horseback for an hour in one direction.
No, yeah, that's a great way to explain it. And I also got to give a shout out to the variety, whereas in a shooter open world, usually you're going place to place to shoot things. In Ghost, you're not necessarily just going place to place to slash things. And that's a great way, that you mentioned, there are the springs to go and you do reflecting. I, some reason, really enjoyed writing the haikus.
Oh, yeah, me too.
I don't know what it was, but that's just something small. Instead of just sitting and having a quick cutscene of him reciting a poem, they give you a couple options, like, here, construct your own. And you look, and you gotta look at usually the 3 options at a time.
Contemplate your existence for a couple minutes, why don't you?
Yeah, and you got this beautiful scenery, you got the nice calming, aesthetic and the music, and then when you construct it, it's not like they just pop on the screen. He, recites it, and it's like, I wrote one, and I was like, oh man, I wrote that, even though, obviously I didn't write those words, but I was like super proud of it. I screenshotted it, and I was like, that's my haiku that I wrote. Yes, other people may have written exact one, obviously, because you're
you only have so many options.
Yeah, so many options, but it's like, I chose that, and now it's in the game, and now they reward you with a headband that's forever attached to your haiku. So I'm just like, now I get to remember my first haiku. I can remember my fourth haiku. Like, you keep track of them. They're written in your inventory. So it's like small things rewarding like that. Like you said, the springs to help, reflect on some of his past and some of the stories. To other things too, hunting down, robbers or thieves, or finding out who burnt the village, or finding out what happened to. And this one's not a spoiler. There's someone who, I think, abandoned his family, and his family ended up being murdered.
Yeah.
But he didn't know they were murdered, and you ended up tracking him down, and you let him know, listen, this happened, they burnt, or whatever the case may have been. So you never really know what you're going for, because the world feels alive. The world does feel alive. Will I find a shrine that you have to do like the parkour climbing, which I'm glad they were able to find how to do that, because I was worried, because that's kind of like Sucker Punch's thing in the 3 infamous games, that the traversing and all that kind of stuff is something that they have in their wheelhouse and they're experts at. So the shrine thing just makes sense. But they also don't make it that it's so taxing. Like, you do it, you climb it, especially like you said, when you get the grappling hook and you're swinging and all these amazing things, and then they're like, well, we're not going to make you climb back down. Here, just push this button, and you can climb down if you really wanted to, but they're like, listen, if you want to continue with your game, let's go. And you load fast to the bottom of the shrine, and you're ready to continue on the game. So you're never just like stuck like grinding something out, like, oh, now I'm not going to climb this because then I got to climb it down, or vice versa. That was always a problem I had with like the Far Cry games and things. And I know sometimes they give you like parachutes and stuff, but I would still like take fall damage or what have you. So that's kind of that example of that balance of, we gave you this experience of climbing up here, honoring the shrine. You get, the small cutscene and things like that. And they're like, you can climb down, or, this is a game. We know this is a game. You can get back down immediately, quick travel to the bottom of a mountain, let's say, and continue with your game. And it's things that I want to see more of now in other games. Like, this game took things, tweaked them, and now I want to see that in more games. Not to the point to get stale, obviously, with your own experience, but there's things now that Ghost did that the like everyone in the industry, hopefully, especially in those style of games, needs to take cues on. There's things like in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, when that comes, there's things that I'm going to be comparing it now, vice versa, like, oh, this isn't as fun as doing this in Ghost, and things like that. And I think, like we always said, competition breeds excellence. Ghost of Tsushima really stepped up what an open world exploring game is to me. Exploring an open world has to be this engaging to me now, because I'm not going to just run through empty plains of a field for nothing, or towns for nothing. When I see a town in Ghost, I'm like, well, let me stop there because I think I have enough, animal skin to upgrade something, or vice versa. And that's more into the combat and loop of the game.
Yeah, and kind of my final thoughts on it is that Sucker Punch did something that not many developers can do, which is kind of mastering duality, which is when they kind of showed off in their state of play the 2 different approaches you have in this game. And it goes into the narrative as well, but that kind of dynamic between the honorable samurai and that dark, hidden ghost. And the way that you can approach situations as you want. You can look how you want, you can present yourself how you want, and depending on the choices you make, it's not choices in the way that there's some kind of like morality system. But there's definitely, as you progress through the game, there are ramifications for the actions you take, and the enemies react accordingly. And when you approach situations as a ghost and you start slaughtering these people, they start taking off, I'm telling you. For you guys who haven't gotten too deep into the game, towards the end of the game, once you start putting in that work, I mean,
bounce
a lot. Like, very often, they see you take out one guy and they're like, yeah, nah, no thanks. Which I love that. I think that's really awesome. And I think, how many games can you really say, honestly, had a solid sword-based action combat mechanism akin to like a Neo, for example, that's tactful? It's not just a button masher. It's you take different stances to different enemies, like a Neo. But at the same time, masters that traditional stealth combat that we've seen from an Assassin's Creed and does both of them at a fairly high level. Not many people could do that. There's people who try to do one and fall short. So for them to basically be able to make two gameplay styles in one and do both at a high level is worth, a fairly, high amount of commendation. Is that not many studios can do stuff like this. There's people who try to do stealth and it's wonky and the AI is a mess. Mm-hmm. There's people who try to do action combat and it feels clunky. And they were able to do both. Where at some point I've gone back and forth within one encampment where like I walk in and I stealth kill a whole bunch of people, and then towards the end I go in loud and proud and I start challenging the remaining enemies. And it's like, come out. Not to mention, my favorite thing about this game is related to the gameplay is that duel mechanism. The one-on-one duel to me is so fun. And I haven't had that much fun on one-on-one battles. Probably, Hellblade's one-on-one battles are pretty good. Yeah. But I love the duels in this game. Yeah, they're so fun.
Mm-hmm. That's a great comparison. So when that first happened, and that's something I didn't know of, where there's a small cutscene and they're doing, and I lost it because again, such a fan of all this lore and samurais. When they're just kind of staring off, and I'm like, what's going on? And I'm like, oh, is this a boss fight? And then it's a one-on-one fight, and even to the small, like when he like kind of with his thumb pushes the sword a little bit, it's so intensing and satisfying. But then it amplifies to this one-on-one honorable fight for the depending how you want to play, and it's just so. And it immediately took me back to, I'm glad you said it, to Hellblades, when it was like, this is not like a ring of enemies. There's not, and you have plenty of that in Ghost. They're like, no, here's a one-on-one. And sometimes it's, especially the one where early on, not really spoiler, but there's you believe a demon, a Tengu is out, and you have to first track him down, then you get into a one-on-one
fight. That's an awesome fight.
Oh, man. I think I even recorded it for myself through PlayStation Share, because I was like, what's going on? I was so engaged, and I was like, this is amazing. And the game is obviously more action based, but when you get to this one-on-one fight, you have to play it smart, because let me tell you, I was getting destroyed. I don't know what I thought. I thought I could just go in, hit triangle a couple times to break their shield and go for it.
Oh no.
No, because of those is what I never learned to parry in games. I usually take my hits and go. No, I was like, no, I need to learn how to parry. I need to learn how to parry, deflect, dodge, get my hits in, and vice versa, read my opponent, because he's just going to take me to town because he's doing those things to me. It's like, I need to learn, and it pushed me to learn. Now I can parry like crazy because those one-on-one fights were so good, and I'm glad we weren't overwhelmed by them, but the ones that we did get are so satisfying, and they're actually very different between each other. Like, there's one where you're just doing something because you found an armor to take. Again, to stay as spoiler free, there was an armor you wanted to take, and then a descendant of that person's armor is still there, thinks you're just a random thief. You do a one-on-one fight until they realize, yeah, you're not some normal thief. You're a samurai. You know what you're doing. To, like I said, this Tengu fight, which was way more artistic and so much more in the lore of what the demons and all these things, and it's just so great to see that. And it's something I didn't expect. It's something I don't know if they showed that in a trailer, because I didn't remember that. Blew me away. I was so hyped when that happened.
Yeah, and I would like to make a note. Don't mistake us comparing this game to other games as saying it's derivative in any ways. I think what we're trying to do is mostly highlight the fact that they paid attention. They've looked at what worked in other places and put their own spin on it and did it successfully. And so I just wanted to put that note in there that, we're throwing around a lot of other games' names, but by no means is Ghost of Tsushima what I would say derivative. Is it the most inventive game in the world? No, not necessarily. But I think they do everything they've sought out to do at a very high level.
Absolutely.
That not many game developers are able to tackle this much with this type of game. Again, keep in mind, this is a period piece. Mm-hmm. And you're not in a city, and this is not the most relatable environment to a bulk of the player base. And the fact that they were able to make it resonate with so many people is not an easy feat. So yeah, I just wanted to put that note in there.
No, absolutely as well.
So we can move on to the narrative if you want.
Yeah, because my thoughts on like the stealth kind of roll into the narrative as well.
So Jin Sakai, the main protagonist of Ghost of Tsushima. So what do you think about his journey?
I didn't think I'd like it so much, and to say that, it's not that I didn't think I was gonna like the game, because I've liked games and not like main characters. You know, I enjoyed other open world games, but sometimes they just give you a non-relatable main character, or they go very generic or silent. And I was always worried that I'm like, am I just gonna be a silent samurai that's kind of doing his thing? And that's not what you get. So now we're going full spoilers and stories if someone's still listening.
Yeah.
So you get complete, character, because you start off on an invasion from the, what was Kotan? I forgot what it was named.
Oh, Kotun Kun or something like that.
Yeah, Kotu Kun. And you're going through and you're with your uncle, and immediately you start thinking, like, I wonder why he's with his uncle, not his father. And that comes later on, and you start getting the flashbacks, which are sometimes not done right. And not to get into like a whole Last of Us rant, the way the Last of Us did some of those were not well done. I think Ghost did it at such a more natural way where it's almost cinematic in like movie quality on the way some of these flashbacks were really revealed to you, and you get to learn who Jin is as a child, through into his older ages, into who he is now. And obviously being a little bit more familiar with this culture and samurai stuff, a lot of the way, the respect they have for their elders, the respect they have for their fellow man, is all great to see that it's there. And not only is Jin just this samurai, which obviously the game is called Ghost of Tsushima, so we know he becomes this person at some point, but you're like, but he's such a by the books rule, honorable man. And I didn't think I was gonna like this character that much, but not only did I end up really liking Jin, I ended up liking, the supporting cast, where characters that I thought were gonna be throwaway right at the beginning. Yuna, Taka. I thought they were gonna be like a couple missions and then that's it. I don't see them.
Even Kenji.
Exactly. I was like, oh, these are characters I'll see probably for Act 1 and that's it. And they stick through. Well, kind of stick through. Those who make it.
The best of their ability.
Those who make it, R.I.P. Those who make it stick through the game, and it's great to see someone who was so minor, someone who I thought was there for plot. I thought she's here just because Jin needed to be, Jin sticking to his guns, sticking to his ways. When he loses constantly to the everyone, to the invaders, and gets knocked off a bridge and stuff. I was like, oh, is she just a plot point? Like, magically she happened to be there. No, she was there for a reason, and she sticks around for a reason because she knows who you are. She knows who your uncle is and what his title can do to get her off this island, to get her away from this with her brother. So just constantly, I kept as the family grew, as you keep seeing these other characters involved, I stayed away from trailers. I thought the whole game was about getting your uncle back, and I was like. And I got him, and then you learn, his relationship with Jin, to the point where he tells Jin, "Listen, Jin, I want to adopt you, and so you can, you're legally my heir." And those were things that just caught me off guard. I'm like, I didn't think I'd care about any, titles and stuff like that. It's like, then you see the flashback scenes, and you see who Jin is and his relationship, why he's so close to his uncle, where is his father, who, early you find out passed away. Or was murdered, and it just put so much. It just made who I thought was gonna be an empty avatar into a complex human, a real person, and even though I was luckily able to I didn't even recognize that he was the actor who was in Man of the High Castle. I think. Yes. It is him, right? Correct. I didn't really realize it because he was so different, and it's just so well done. And the story is believable. That's one thing really to me is everything that happened was very believable, especially when it's laid out to you in the way that you're slowly discovering it. So in the narrative, what what characters really stood out to you, and what did you think of the characters? And Jin, of course.
Yeah, so for Jin, I would like to say that I am aware of some of the critiques that Jin is getting. A lot of the critiques that Ghost of Tsushima in general gets is targeted towards Jin, because I think a lot of people mistake his stoicism and the way he kind of approaches various dialogue and situations as boring and kind of emotionless, when I think that understanding Jin requires understanding the context of how he was raised and who he's surrounded with and the ramifications of being any other way but the way he is. When you're so honor bound and everything is about honor and being refined and being presentable and not being over emotional and not breaking, and that's drilled into your head, and especially when you understand that to a certain extent he's battling with himself. And the interesting is that it's battling with his own morality, but and this is definitely spoiler territory here, when the uncle basically alludes to the fact, and Yuriko alludes to the fact that his father battled with the same demons he did.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. The father, in many ways, was his own variation on the ghost, where he was willing to go to the places that the uncle obviously was super against and not comfortable with. And that in many ways came in direct conflict with the traditions that the family, the Sakai family, and that entire line had come through, just completely breaking convention and doing what they had to do in the moment to protect life, to protect what they had built all this time. And so I think that when you understand that inner conflict and him trying to be something that in many ways he is not, I feel like his stoicism and his seriousness makes a lot more sense and makes him a very complex character that in the moment, yeah, you see kind of like a straight face, but underneath it all, you can see like a deeply troubled man who constantly second guesses every decision he makes because he's trying to live up to something that in many ways he knows he's going to fall short of. And all he's trying to do is hold everything together long enough to save his home and, you know, salvage what remnant he can of his kind of public persona. In terms of the other characters, yeah, Yuna I love. I really fell in love with Yuna and specifically Taka's characters when you fully understand the context of where they come out of. When you understand that labor camp and you actually go there in person and see like how deeply troubling that environment was, it really it makes you understand specifically Yuna's approach to things a lot more.
Yeah.
And it makes you a lot more compassionate for Taka, where you on the surface see this kind of scaredy cat type of person that, you know, he wants to be this tough guy. He has this trade, but he just ain't got it. He just ain't that dude. But then you understand, like, he came through some dark stuff that, for one thing, Yuna remembers a lot better than he does. But this is not a guy who... He's seen his fair share of bloodshed and dark, troubling, human trafficking. Like, he's seen this stuff.
Yeah.
And all he wants to do is do his small part to remedy that. And, like, how tough is that to want to know how the world is, but to not have the physical capabilities of doing anything about it? And so it makes his eagerness make all that much more sense. And what I love about this game is that it kind of strikes that balance between having this over-the-top cinematic, super-powered samurai flair, but at the same time show the very grounded darkness of war. And through the tales and Jin's story in general, you kind of see that, like, things don't wrap up cleanly. There's no easy fix to this. No, like, yeah. Jin doesn't fix this situation without destroying his own life in the process. This world is not purged of the Mongol invasion without a crap ton of innocent civilians dying, being kidnapped, and even worse. Not to get too graphic, but they allude to it all the way there. You see every side of war. You see the people who fight and win. You see the people who generally are wiped out. The samurai are gone. You see individuals take up arms and their entire family are killed. You see people stand up for their family and show honor. You see people sell out everyone they know just to try to survive it. And it makes you constantly question, like, what is right? is right survival, is right standing by codes. It plays with a lot of themes like that, and that's why I love the dynamic between Jin and specifically Ryuzo, who, I mean, he obviously prioritizes survival above everything. What is honor when I'm dead, basically?
Yeah, exactly.
What is standing by my morals when my head is on the ground and my body separated? Like, how did that work out for him? So I'm trying to do my best to survive as long as possible, to put myself in an advantageous situation, to possibly save my home long term. And so that even butted heads with Jin, where in many ways Jin was kind of put into the situation of his uncle, where he's like, no, there is a code that we stand by. And even Ryozo brings up a great point. It's like, you're not even standing by your own code. How many times have you violated what you've stood by many times for what you see as the greater good? And in many ways, him and the Ronin are doing their best to put themselves in a good situation that maybe long-term will allow them to free their home in their own way. So I love the way that they play around with morality and codes and ethics and stuff like that. And so to not be too long-winded, yeah, I'm in love with the narrative. And do I think it's flawless? No. Do I think it's the most inventive thing in the world? No. But I think they play around with a lot of meta narratives that differentiate it from a lot of games that we've seen come out, especially in recent years.
No, absolutely. And like you're saying, with Ryozo, who you think at first is just someone he knows, and there's so much backstory to them on why he ended up being a rogue mercenary sense, and why he runs with these Straw Hat mercenaries. And there's just so much, he tells Jin, you beat me then. I couldn't live up to what you were doing and what you were aspiring to do, so I had to find my own path. And you think, old friend, he's going to be his new, best friend. He quickly, he pretty much quickly turns on you. I know you do, like, take some ships or stuff, but he quickly turns on you when he has a better chance, like you were saying. He's like, hey, you're doing what you need to survive and save your uncle. I need to do what I need to do to survive and save my men.
Yeah.
What's the difference? It's just I'm choosing one side, you're choosing the other. And it obviously puts them face to face.
Yeah, how genius is the writing that in a way you are kind of positioned to be like, oh man, he really screwed over Jin, screw that guy. But at the same time, once you understand the context of their story in the background, in many ways, every decision Ryuzo made and the path he was on was kind of Jin's own doing. Yeah. Jin, exactly. In many ways, in an indirect way, destroyed any credibility Ryuzo had of becoming a samurai. Yep. And so from that point onwards, it was all self-preservation. He had no option but to preserve himself in whatever that manifested as. And Jin got to go ahead and be this well-renowned person, but Ryuzo didn't have that. So him playing Mr. Nice Guy would get him nowhere because his reputation was already in the crapper. So at this point, all he had was his life, him living and him surviving. And in many ways, him crossing Jin was no more immoral than any of the decisions he made before that point. In many ways.
No, yeah, absolutely. And it's great, because, obviously the whole game you play mainly through the eyes of Jin. But when you do see, after Ryuzo does betray you, I don't want to use the word betray, because again, self-preservation and in a different time.
Yeah, it's selfish, but I can't say that it's necessarily wrong, considering the position he's in.
You see him struggle with that when he first betrays you and you walk in, or you don't think he showed up to before you guys are storming the castle, and you do find him in one of behind the building, wherever it was that you found him. He's just sitting there and he talks to you. He didn't try to just bombard you, and that shows still that sort of respect and honor that they have, even though he is now a rogue mercenary. He still had a respect, and he told Jin, listen, I have a better offer, that not only a better offer, I have what I think I need. He trusted you to get food for his men, and you fail like 3 or 4 times right off the bat. You're like, there's no, he keeps asking you, where's the food for my men? I promised you my men, but you promised that you'd put food in their bellies. These are men who, no matter what ended up in their lives, they're here, they're hungry, they're struggling. Jin, you didn't provide. Now here comes, the Khan who's saying, eventually puts the bounty on the ghost's head. He says, get me Jin, he's going to supply my men. He's going to feed my men. And you see his constant struggle with that even later on when, no one can kill Jin. Or, no one's been able to kill him. And Ryu's, you can tell in the voice acting. I mean, I played the game in Japanese, so I don't know what it rose for English, or I heard it's fantastic in English as well. But you see the emotion in his face, like, listen, maybe we don't have to kill him. Let's get around. Let's get to the support he has. And even though he is coming up with that idea, you see him not like, aha, I got it. Let's do this. Let's get him with this. No, you see him, well, maybe we have a different option. And you see almost like a struggle, like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to have to really snake and get my previous friend, rival, whatever it may be. So it's like those character interactions that you get throughout the game multiple times. And it's just so fantastic. Like, before everything happens with, obviously super spoiler with Taka's death. Before that, she and Jin really share a nice moment up on a watchtower where they're drinking.
Yeah.
And they're laughing and they're telling jokes, and you can tell them just having this sort of moment. And she really is aspiring to have those times again with her brother, with her family. That's her family. And she's like, that's why, she's doing these things to help you out. Also vice versa, because, you're there because she helped you out from the get-go. And it just comes full circle, and you see these interactions slowly progress. It's not like at one point she helps you, and then the next moment she's like, all right, I'll do whatever you want. It's all self-preservation. She's like, well, I'll do this because it's going to get to my brother, and it's going to reunite us, and then we can get a chance to get off this island and restart and live a different life. And that's something that was done so well in the narrative that it wasn't just like thrown out there in front of you. You see it slowly develop. And I didn't think I would see that with so many characters. And the characters I really didn't expect to even think. Ryozo, he's a huge part in this game, in this narrative, in this story, and in this experience. And I didn't think so. I'm like, he's a Straw Hat. And, again, I don't know where it was going at the time. And look at it to the point, like you said, you hate him right off the get-go. Like, he betrayed me. Little bit goes by, and you're like, oh, man, like you said, it's almost a mirror reflection of what was Jin doing. And you see that really expand in the narrative, and that's something I don't know how other people I know other people are going to take inspirations and try to tell stories this way. I hope they nail it, because this is fantastic way to do it. I just really commend. I didn't expect this from Sucker Punch. They've always been very red versus blue in decisions. Yeah. And the whole time you're playing Ghost of Tsushima, even though it's all your decisions, you're really walking that line. Like,
yeah, it's all purple, to be honest.
Yeah, you're really in there like, oh man, do I do this? And we haven't even talked about when you're, becoming Ghost. When you start putting those honorable ways and your traditions away to become the Ghost.
Yeah, and that's kind of a great segue. Like, there's a ton of major supporting characters in this that we could spend all day talking about, because they're all incredibly interesting with their own kind of narrative threads.
Absolutely.
But I think one person that we could probably end off the narrative section on talking about, which is really interesting, and we've mentioned him, but we haven't gone deep into it, is the uncle. Yes. The leader of his own, clan. In many ways, the last of his name. And a person that you bump heads with a lot during the game, and in many times you end up pretty frustrated, understandably so, with him. Mm-hmm. Why he's so rigid. But at the same time, I felt like, as frustrated as you might be with him, it's almost like a thing you can't help but respect. Because at the same time, as rigid and unbending as he's being, and in many ways inflexible and putting people's lives at risk, when you lose your homeland and you've lost countless of your men and so much of your family, I think there is honestly something to be said to, listen, we don't have almost anything anymore, but all we can do is just not stoop to their level. What we have is our honor. The way we came in is the way we're going to go out, period. And for him, it was not a life or death game. It was, let's not lose ourselves to the animals. And that's not, when you give up your traditions, you might as well be dead. There's nothing left to save, in his opinion. And I think that's 100% a respectful thing. And it's almost hard from our American perspective to grasp our heads around that level of emphasis on honor. Like, our American brains are like, listen, do what you got to do to survive. Deal with that after. Yeah, you want to put your samurai armor back on and act all honorable and, fight people to their face after the point? Great, beautiful. But, like, listen, your land is, like, a couple battles away of being completely lost, and they're about to sail for the mainland. Like, do what you do to stop this. But at the same time, this is a man who's well-read about the millennia-long heritage that he's inherited by holding the mantle of samurai. That means something. And to throw that away in the face of an enemy that has come here and shown nothing but barbarism, and your response is to be barbaric as well, I understand why he could be like, we can do anything but that, but become like them. And it's not even worth saving the land if the land we save is going to be inherited by a new form of barbarian in his mind. And I mean, I could respect that. And that's why, like, the uncle I know is well hated amongst a lot of people. I was reading a lot of different people's thoughts and stuff like that, and they couldn't stand the uncle and how annoying it is. I think understanding the full context of the history and what he felt like he was holding on to. Jin, in many ways, trying to represent that future, but the uncle not trying to lose the past and not trying to dishonor his ancestors and the people who had most recently died by fighting in a way that they would have not approved of. I think there's something to that.
No, absolutely. And that's, and I've seen that too, where people are like, oh, why is the uncle so stuck up? And like, he explains even a little bit in a time when he's talking to Jin, where he's like, listen, this country used to be in turmoil, civil war, and people were fighting like animals, until we came up with the tradition, the method, the unity that is the samurai, and put order. So if we lose that, then what was it all for? Almost, I guess, was what I interpreted it as, is like, what was it for if we throw everything away right now and we resort to back where we were? And that's why I'm glad that this game, it showed that struggle. So when you learned a ghost technique or anything that wasn't like in the samurai technique in the game, they call it ghost technique, from my understanding. Any of the secret killing, the assassination from above, poison, all that stuff. It threw me for a loop, because I'm like, they taught you that, and every time they taught you something else, you saw it in Jin, and he even vocally like told it to people, like, I shouldn't do this. That's not the way I was raised. And you have the flashback showing your sword training with your uncle, and then and this is something that was wild, that took me for a loop. So they teach, let's say, the poison dart. When you learn the blow dart, there's a small tutorial and you do it on an enemy. It's no big deal. But when you actually put it to use in let's say you're storming a campsite, it slows down and you remember words that your uncle told you on why you shouldn't work that way and fight that way and do it that way. And small clips like that where it just stopped me for a second. I'm like, oh man, I didn't know you guys were gonna. You showed me this new tool, and really until you use it, you don't start to learn there. I'm like, oh man, I am betraying what I was taught and what I was raised in. So that small flashback, because then it flashbacks to almost a specific line that your uncle told you, and then you're like, oh man. So you're starting to see that turmoil, that strength, that like, though Jin is doing what he needs to do, he's struggling with it. Where his uncle, Lord Shimura, I don't know. Shimura. So when he's, when you rescue him early on, and he tells you, when he actually rewinded a second, when the Khan tells him, listen, your boy is butchering my men, and the Lord doesn't even want to accept that. He goes, I didn't raise him that way, I didn't train him that way. Until obviously later, they witness it. He knows, listen, you're doing what you need to do to save us and to save our land, and I understand. But, the shoguns, and this is not gonna fly well. You're becoming known as, the ghost. You're becoming known as this rogue assassin, this demon. And some of the mythos, people think he's like a demon. Like the way some of these people react to you when you start doing more of the ghost techniques, when you're doing these jumping assassinations, when you're doing the multiple killings, when you activate the ghost stance, which every time I thought the game was done showing me something new, they're like, oh, you got all 4 stances? That's cool. Here's a super secret stance that's amazing. It goes black and white with the splash of red. But usually when you do that, people look at you. You see your enemy looking at you and being like, what am I... This is not who you guys thought. Even though they know they're crazy animals, but they're like, that's our way. You guys are supposed to be these honorable one-on-one, slow, methodical, and you're just cutting people up. Whether they're facing you, whether they're not facing you, whether they're going to run away from you, whatever it is. And that's such a fantastic way to just show the transformation of a character, but also show that balancing struggle. And I can't believe it. And again, people may think that's just a small mechanic. Oh, it's just like a rage mode. There's more to it. There's so much story connected to get to that point.
Yeah.
That I didn't know that stance existed. One of the first things I did in the game was grind out stances because I couldn't wait to get them. And then here's a big story one that you see, just and it's pushed. It's they pushed Jin to do that. He didn't voluntarily do it. He was pushed to the limit, because that was right after Taka's death, if I remember. That he's really pushed to that limit, been like, listen, this is this, and even though this exact stance and this exact method isn't traditional, everything about getting to that stance isn't either. Like, to get it, you have to kill people without being hit, without letting them try to strike you, without letting them interrupt you, which is not the samurai way.
Yeah.
And you learn, and you see that, and that's just something I could not believe I was experiencing and feeling. I know I keep saying that this game is a game, but this game also did push me and to feel things, and I did have fun experiencing this game in a completely different way that I didn't expect.
Yeah, and I did actually think of something earlier that I wanted to mention, which is the whole idea that like Jin represents the future, and in many ways Lord Shimura represents the past. Mm-hmm. But when you mentioned something really good, which was the idea when Shimura talks about the past and why things were out of control, and the samurai were the sense of reason to bring everything together. And in many ways, I think there's a strong argument to be made that if anyone's looking towards the future in a real substantive way, it's Shimura, because he understands that this country's gonna have to be rebuilt. And with rebuilt, this is only done in an effective way, as far as he's seen, through law and order. Mm-hmm. And so the samurai are going to be the ones to reestablish Tsushima to its former greatness. It's not going to be done through these covert Assassin's Creed-esque mechanisms of jumping off, roofs and slaughtering people and cutting people's heads off and, shooting poison darts into them. That's not how you rebuild a country. That's how you destabilize a country permanently. And towards the end, he really brings it home where the woman, it's actually a male, is pushing that cart, and he mentions the fact that there's the ghost army building. And Jin is like, listen, I didn't know anything about that. And Shimura basically hits him with a little bit of a I told you so. It's like, listen, this is beyond you now. This is the trend of what I told you, why you can't do these things, because the lawlessness is infectious. It's not something that sticks to one person, one man, one woman. It's a trend, and you fostered a trend, and now you're going to live and you're going to die, and this trend will continue, and it's destabilized the shogunate pretty much to the point where new clans have to be established, new everything has to be established, because the country has to be rebuilt in a way that it's only going to be rebuilt with the death of the ghost, whether that be from Jin or that be, as the ghost of an idea.
Exactly.
So I think there's a lot of basically Shimura predicting what was going to happen actually really playing out in real time by the end of the game. It was predictive, but in many ways we saw it play out exactly the way he said it was, which is you're going to, if you let go of these customs that we've built there, they're there for a reason. And you're going to slip into something, not that we don't know what it's going to become, but we've seen it before. And there was a reason we had to kill it off, because it plunged us into chaos. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think in many ways he foretold something that was coming, and it sets it up perfectly in many ways for a sequel in the event that they want to do that.
Yeah, the way that, you know, I see it go both ways, where this is an ending where I'd be okay if this is it, and obviously, like you said tonight, you know, I'll get to detail. The ghost is gonna live on. Obviously, Jin does not pass, but not only, like you said, there's an army of ghosts. There's people who were inspired, and you even see this early on when Taka who's not a fighter, like you said he isn't experienced in this stuff, is putting himself out there because he wants to do his part, and he's inspired by Jin, even though he's seen Jin not do, you know, the most ethical, let's say, or traditional or samurai way of doing things. It inspired him, so you see that's a small spark from the beginning. And so like you said, your uncle tells you, listen, you're gonna cause something way bigger than you, and that's what it is. Like Ghost of Tsushima, you know, yes, he has that name, you know, the tale, people heard of him, he's wanted, but there's something bigger now because other people heard these tales. And think of the people who are a little bit more experienced that heard these tales. Take that inspiration and advice that Taka had and give it to someone a little bit more skillful, someone who may be a little bit less traditional and less moral based. And that's what you know, he was, you know, worried for, to the point where he has to disband the family name.
Yeah.
And that's not something that's done easily. You know, he disbands that family name and tells Jin, that's it, you are the Ghost of Tsushima. And so when it comes to sequel based, it's like, I hope there is, and there probably will be, because, you know, Sony does like their,
they love a
sometimes
trilogy.
One-offs. They love trilogies. They love, you know, they do like IPs with sequels. Obviously, They want a franchise. I mean, that's the word I'm looking for. They want a franchise. You know, don't get me wrong. I'd love it to be a kind of a one sweet bow, but if the passion's there and the story's there, Sony's gonna be like, oh, listen, where's Ghost 2? And you know, how long are we gonna wait until we see Sucker Punch's next game or Ghost 2 or whatever it may be? But the fact is that this game doesn't sequel bait necessarily. It's a tale that is so wrapped up nicely, even depending on your, I mean, it's a big decision, but it doesn't affect the story in a big way. I don't, that last decision you have at the end.
Yeah.
But it's conclusive, you know, like, I put the control down for a minute and I was just like, man. And it's one of the games where I was like, I wish I could re-experience this.
Yeah. Super spoiler moment. What did you choose? Did you choose to save him?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you killed him. Interesting.
So, because I was putting my mindset in there. So, obviously, you get an option to kill your uncle or not. Because once Lord Shimura tells you, listen, the family name is disbanded, our empire, our traditions, it's disbanded because of what you've done. You know, the shoguns have a bounty on you, pretty much. You're wanted. They want you killed because of what you've done. Well, the way you've done it. And you do have to battle your uncle. And so I was trying to put myself in that mindset where if I let him live, that's not their way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's almost, it was, so I wanted, I don't know. I don't know what I was exactly thinking in that moment, where I was just like, I took a second and I was like, well, the samurai way thing to do, what he wants me to do, because you do defeat him, is kill him.
Yes.
That would be the traditional thing to do. And so I wanted, in a sense, I wanted him to pass with the idea of, what you taught me is not gone.
Yeah. I can respect that, yeah.
So that's what I went into into it thinking,
Yeah,
because I did. I heard early on that there was like a decision.
Yeah.
Then trust me, I did not know it was that decision. Jesus, I mean, geez, you guys just gonna slap me with that after this whole time. And again, I'm a person who really liked the uncle, Lord Shimura, so I'm assuming you actually went the other route.
Yeah. So the way I interpreted it was this. Yeah, I did not kill him, and my justification for that was, yeah, he prepositioned it as a samurai, give me my honorable death.
Yep.
And up until that point, for hours at that point, it was drilled into my head that, hey, you are not a samurai anymore. You are not a samurai. You do not abide by the same code of ethics. You are not abiding by the same code of honor. Which at that point, when he disbanded the family name, I was officially not a samurai. Which means that for the first time, I can justifiably put family and our rapport above codes of honor. Those codes do not apply to me, so I'm not gonna. I could be the bigger man in this situation and justify it, because hell, they're gonna be on me to kill me one way or another. So at least I can hold on to my morality and my humanity by not taking the life of a man that I love very much. So that's kind of how I interpreted it. However, I think there's equal justifications either way, either giving him what he's expressly asking of you, or taking the other road and choosing to value family and not taking the life on that basis alone.
No, yeah. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, because you're essentially, Jin. You see Jin struggle throughout the game, that he didn't do enough when his father was dying, when his father was calling out to him. Now you get the chance again to save your other father.
Yeah.
At least in a figure, even though he's your uncle, he continued to raise you, and like I said, he even says, "I want to take you in as my son." So, my legacy goes to you, and so that again, it's just such a struggle to be like, man, because he obviously doesn't want to do it, and again, I was thinking so much at the moment, and I was like, what do I do? And I just did it, because I don't know, it just that thought popped in my head. I'm like, that's what he's asking for, and in doing that, he's gonna know, like I said,
all is not lost. Yeah.
All is not lost. I am still who you raised me to be, and I still hold those morals.
Yeah.
Whereas, obviously, if you don't kill him, he's always gonna know. Let's say one day he gets the news that the Ghost of Tsushima was killed. Let's say, again, that doesn't happen in the game. Don't worry. I mean, but let's say and I guess that's a tale of a good narrative in a good game, because I was thinking of things that we're never gonna see.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of things further on, like, well, maybe one day he's gonna get news that Jin was killed, or someone brings him Jin's head, and I'm like, wait, what am I doing? This is not a tale. This is not a history book I'm writing. And I'm just like, wow, that's a narrative. That's how Sucker Punch really hit it, just really nailed it, and did an absolute amazing job telling the story, where I'm thinking of future things that may not happen. So, but yeah, that's how I decided to send off Lord Shimura, with the hopes of him knowing what you passed on to me is still alive.
Yeah, so I guess to end off the narrative section, what I want to say is one interesting point about the idea of what the ghost means. For a long time, obviously, that the ghost kind of translated to a by any means approach. By any means necessary is kind of what the ghost stood for. Free our land by any means necessary. Protect your family by any means necessary. But I believe towards the latter half of the game, ghost translated from by any means necessary to resist. Resist the oppressors coming in as the Mongols. Resist convention that might be holding you back and killing off your men in the form of your uncle. And possibly resist the traditional law and order that left us vulnerable all this time in the form of the shogun, which is basically alluding to the fact that with that resistance, there's going to be some kind of faction-based civil war in the relation of the shogun sending in his samurai versus the people who stand by the ghost, which is further destabilization of Tsushima as a region in general. So I think there's a lot of interesting things where there was definitely a pivot in the messaging outside of Jin's own wishes. By no means did Jin ever want to stand against a shogun. He didn't want to stand against his uncle. what he wanted to do was mitigate the loss of life and ensure that we get rid of this enemy as fast as possible. And that did not fall in line with some of the war techniques that the Shogun and Lord Shimura had in mind. So that kind of resistance edge, I think, was a big player in the latter half of the game that didn't expressly say that that's what the Ghost transitioned into, but I think in many ways the subtext kind of alluded to that.
No, absolutely. I agree completely.
So I guess we can move into the final section of the Spoilercast, which is our feelings about Ghost of Tsushima in the context of it being a Sony exclusive, in the context of kind of end capping the PS4, being one of the last Sony PS4 exclusives, because the next exclusive is theoretically going to be a PS5 game, most likely, and how we feel about it in the context of 2020 releases and where it falls in with Game of the Year. So, Steve, how do you feel about this as a Sony exclusive and how it compares to some of the others?
So, initially when I was, starting the game, again, I went very clean. I had saw 1 or 2 trailers. I saw, obviously, the E3 press they did a couple years ago. And at first, I was slightly worried because I was spoiled. So when obviously, it's a Sony exclusive, a first-party exclusive. So when I started to play and I saw it didn't have that necessarily that Sony touch, that sort of over-the-top polish.
Yeah.
And you got to remember, and almost everyone's in the same boat. They came off of The Last of Us Part 2 and got into Ghost. And say what you want about Last of Us 2, but graphically and mechanically, Last of Us is amazing.
Oh, yeah.
That's beautiful.
About as good as it gets right now.
Yeah. I again, completely took my breath away.
Yeah, graphically.
Graphically. Pure cosmetic there.
Yeah.
So when you start off Ghost, the game isn't necessarily pushing the line graphically. There's a scene early on where you're like running through a field of bamboo and you're literally going through the bamboo. Like the bamboo's like going through your horse, going through you. And I'm like, wow, it was a little jarring for a minute. And I was like, oh man, is this not what we think it is? And quickly you learn that it's not supposed to be. Because that scene would have been super annoying and I don't know, probably would have given me motion sickness if the camera was super tight on him and him trying to run through all the bamboo staffs and stalks. But quickly I learned, I'm like, well, this game isn't supposed to be this super realistic, hard, heavy, count the freckles game. It leans on the art style. And one of the first things we talked about, and I don't remember if it was the main podcast pilot or later on, what we wanted from next gen. And this is what I want. This game is stylized. This game has a style. After that scene and you're running finally on your horse through a field of all the white flowers, lilies. I'm not a botanist. I don't know the name of flowers.
Yeah.
But when you're running up that hill and he's even leaning, kind of like running his hand through him, and that's when you get the splash screen of the title screen. I'm like, wait a minute. I said, I immediately took back what I said. I was like, wait a minute. This game looks really good, and it's the style it's in, where it's like there. So I quickly reset. I was like, oh no, hold on, this is way up my list. And then I started having more and more fun with it and really enjoying, like we just talked about, the characters, the gameplay loop, the stealth mechanics, choosing to be stealthy, choosing to be more honorable and upfront, yelling into the crowds, come at me, send me your strongest warrior, and you slash him down. Or you don't slash him down if you didn't time it right. Especially when they start faking you out, and it drives me nuts. But it's just so well done where I'm like, now I see it. Now I see the Sony exclusive. Now I see what I want from future games. Because you and I think, are on the same boat. I'm not this huge graphic like demander. Like if the game doesn't look like crazy realistic, I don't want it. That's not me. I really don't care. I mean, you guys all know how much Sonic I play. Trust me, I don't care about graphics. But
you're talking to Sonic and Castlevania guys, so
yeah, I literally was playing Castlevania 3 on the way home. So it didn't matter. But the game was so artistically styled.
Yeah.
And it fit. It wasn't just styled this way for style's sake. It's styled this way because that's the story they wanted to tell. This is how the characters are. This is the world that you're in. And it just made sense. So it quickly ran up the list, and quickly I was like, oh no, this is a Sony masterpiece. When I think Sony masterpiece, I'm thinking, the Last of Us 1 masterpiece status, God of War 4, whatever, God of War PS4. When I think Spider-Man, when I think some other, even though it's not exclusive anymore, Detroit Become Human, what it was doing in their rightful, genre, I'm like, oh, this really took this open world action space that Sony didn't really have. I don't consider God of War an open world game. You can't consider the Uncharted games open world. They're a little bit more of a linear experience. Now here's this, and I like those linear experience sometimes, but here's an open world that isn't just an open world for open world's sake. Here's an open world because this is the world you're living in, and it makes sense because there's stuff to do in this world. And so that's why quickly I'm like, oh, this deserves to be up there. Sucker Punch has always kind of been, literally since the beginning of the generation, because Infamous was sort of a launch game. It was delayed. It was supposed to be a launch title, but it was delayed, I think, to launch window. And that game had lackluster. It was in the middle where I really enjoy it. It's my favorite Infamous. I know that's sort of hearsay, but now my favorite, Sucker Punch game. Obviously, and I think it's most people's. It's got to be Ghost.
Yeah.
Like this is why they're first party. People have always been wondering, because I believe Sony purchased them between Infamous 1 and 2, and people were like, why?
Think so, yeah.
I think if I'm correct, I've heard Colin say it tons of times, so I'm pretty sure that's where it is. So it's like, and then from then they worked on other stuff, and then we got Infamous 2 and we got Second Son, but now it's like, oh no, they're a powerhouse. They're someone to really use to show off why someone should get your console. When people were like, oh, Spider-Man's fantastic on PlayStation, and the Last of Us series is there, and the God of War is there, and all these games are there, Horizon and those games are great in their own right. But now you also can flex Sucker Punch. Like, listen, we have Sucker Punch who made Ghost, and whether they make a Ghost of Tsushima 2 or Ghost of whatever,
yeah,
or even another new IP, because this is a new IP. They worked on Infamous for so long. They give them a new IP and they just knock it out of the park, almost in the same way. And I saw a lot of parallel, even in myself, to Guerrilla with going from Killzone to Horizon.
Oh yeah,
where that really put them on the map. And I think this reintroduced Sucker Punch as that juggernaut first party that they deserve to be there. Absolutely, they deserve to be there.
Yeah, I mean, personally, putting this game into context, it broke into two of my personal generational top threes. First off, it broke into my Sony exclusive PS4 top three. And I kind of stewed on this one for a while because recency bias is a hell of a drug. I wanted to make sure I'm like, okay, I'm not caught up in the hype, right? And so I did look at a list of PS4 Sony exclusives. And my personal list for my favorite ones goes God of War, Horizon, and then I got to put Ghost there now.
Yeah.
The only way is Last of Us counts as a PS3 exclusive in my opinion because it launched there. It just relaunched the remastered version on PS4, so I don't count it as
Correct.
a PS4 exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
If that counts as a PS4 exclusive, then yeah, that obviously takes one and it bumps the other ones. But yeah, it breaks into my top three favorite Sony exclusives. And then I also think it breaks into my top three of generational style games. And that is going to be Persona, that's going to be Breath of the Wild, and then that Ghost of Tsushima is right there. In terms of having one of the most beautiful art styles that I've probably ever seen, the way it plays around with like color saturations, different environments, diversity of environments, and it's just gorgeous. And the fact that it has such a limited UI but doesn't make it impossible to navigate, I think is masterful.
Mm-hmm.
And so now let's put it into the context of generational releases. Now, in the context of all PS4 games, this is kind of the end cap of the generation. We're moving into
Correct.
next gen now. Where do you think it fits in there? Is it high up there? Is it middle? Is it low? What do you feel?
I mean, it's got to be high up there. I just don't see why, from all the stuff we just praised this game about for the last, hour, to the little things, they got the menu looking right and functioning right. It's not loud, it's not busy, and a lot of people complain about like Borderlands 3's menus being crazy confusing and all this motion and all this stuff. I like that it's nice and quiet. I like that it's there. I see exactly what I need to see. To the little, like I said, the little things they got right. Fast travel. I can't even open up Twitter, and that game already. I'm playing on.
Yes, we didn't mention the load times. Holy crap!
Holy cow! Oh my goodness! And the fact that they came out, they're like, yeah, we had to actually extend the load times.
How did they do that?
I said, what are you talking? Because even though again, this is not like the craziest graphical game, this game does look fantastic, and this would not run on a PS3. This wouldn't run on a 360. Those things would explode. So to have such a graphically just amazing game, to then just load instantly. Like when I fast travel, there's no cutscene, there's no nothing. Literally, there'll be like a tip will flash, and then it'll darken, and then I'm there.
Yeah, it's
like
nuts.
Again, my iPhone won't even scan my face yet sometimes, and it's done. And I'm like, wow, I'm so used to this, like being on my phone, scrolling through a couple Twitters or whatever, looking at a TikTok or whatever, while my game loads, and it's something you're so used to. The Last of Us, again, coming off The Last of Us has normal, I want to say like normal length,
Yeah, not too long.
Loading screens, they're
normal.
not too long, but they're not like the fast. And then Ghost just comes and just like, it's instant. And I'm like, and I think back where I'm like, at the beginning of the generation, when we had these other games that took longer to load, even, GTA that's been constantly updated, everybody knows that loading screen. Oh my goodness. That GTA loading screen is forever, that first one. And I don't ever experience that with Ghost. So that just also puts them, it puts this game high up there because I'm constantly playing the game. The game doesn't make me take a break. It doesn't make me take a second to look at my phone, to think, to go to the dashboard, to see anything. No, the game is like, listen, you sat down to play this game, we're going to keep giving you the game. And that's just fantastic. So where does it line up for you in that aspect?
Yeah, I'd say it's high. I think it's far from like the best game of the generation. I wouldn't do all that. But because at the end of the day, though, I think the narrative is incredibly compelling. I think the world is awesomely realized. It is a third-person action game where you go from encampment to encampment and take it over with a narrative thread going through. You know what I mean? So in many ways, it's a fleshed-out Far Cry, and though that makes it one of my favorite games of the generation, absolutely, I have to be more objective and understand that like. A game that in many ways has existed before in other forms, I can't say is like the best game of the generation. But at the same time, it's definitely up there just because of when you talk about games of the generation, there's different categories you do it. How is the story? How is the gameplay? How does it control? How does it run? All these things. And it scores high across the board. So that automatically puts it up on the higher echelon. So yeah, it's high up for me. I can't place it because I haven't made a top 50 list of PS4 games. So I think it definitely breaches top 15, no doubt. I would say it probably breaches top 10. Beyond that, I would have to do a little bit more research to place it. But yeah, I think it places high.
Absolutely. So obviously when we're still a little way off, but a ways off, when Game of the Year discussions start coming, easy contender.
Oh yeah,
obvious, easy.
It's tough to beat. There's a couple that might be able to outdo it depending on your taste, but this is tough to beat. Yeah,
absolutely. Like I said, anything else that comes out now and games that I was super enjoying before, Final Fantasy 7 remake and all these games, I'm like, now I go back and compare them, like, oh man, did this top my experience with it? And I'm like, for a lot of them, yeah, it did. A lot of them where I thought I already pretty much had my Game of the Year set, and I was like, nah, Ghost came out of nowhere and snuck, not to be, a pun, but snuck up on me. The game snuck up on me.
All right, yeah, so in terms of, 2020 releases, we spoke about it earlier, and I said that going forward, the only games that I think even stand a chance to possibly bump it is maybe Cyberpunk. Maybe. I'm really excited for Cyberpunk. They're doing a lot there. It's a very ambitious game, so I don't know how that's going to fare against a more streamlined game like Ghost of Tsushima, where it's one island, one place, feudal Japan. You understand the setting, a story all about that era. opposed to something as nuanced as a Cyberpunk that's playing around with a whole bunch of craziness. I don't know how they're going to play. Obviously, going before that, depending on your taste level, maybe Doom Eternal, maybe Animal Crossing resonates a little bit more with you. A lot of people love those games. So, there are contenders for Game of the Year, but and then, hey, to some people, Last of Us 2 easily is number one. To some people. Not my personal Game of the Year, but as of right now, it's Ghost of Tsushima very easily by a wide gap. The only thing I could see dethroning it is maybe Cyberpunk. Personally, I know I'm gonna love Valhalla, but I don't think that's like Game of the Year material so much as it's gonna be a fun game, kind of like Far Cry 6 when that comes out. Like, it's gonna be a fun game. I don't think it's gonna be reinventing the wheel, you know?
Exactly, which Ghost did do in many aspects.
Oh yeah, and in many ways, it set a new bar for what a third-person exploration-based open world can be. Right at the end of the gen, which means that going forward, if you're a PS5 game, a PlayStation 5 game, you better not be getting outdone by a PS4 game, because you're going to look crazy. Because, again, keep in mind how crazy some of these people looked releasing some of their more linear third-person games after Last of Us came out on PS3. And if your PS4 game was looking a little choppy, they're like, hey, they did that on PS3. What's your problem? So, Ghost of Tsushima at the end of PS4 end capped the generation perfectly, in my opinion. It built upon everything that we saw from the previous third-person action games, especially in the Sony ecosystem, refined it and put out something to kind of send the generation off with. And going forward to PS5, bring it. You got to bring it, because like they really upped the game here, and it makes me really excited. Again, Sucker Punch are an incredibly talented team. So it makes me excited to see what the other big teams are able to do now going forward. Like, now that Ghost exists, what does Naughty Dog's next game look like? You know what I mean? What does CD Projekt Red, after maybe Cyberpunk, when they do another Witcher game, what does that look like? Does that take inspiration from Ghost? There's so many different things. Ubisoft, Ubisoft's is looking at Ghost for sure.
Yeah, I think the two biggest people looking, obviously third party, Ubisoft's like, yo, people have been asking us forever, why didn't we do this? There was so much potential there.
Yeah.
And I think if you think in first party, for people to learn, I'm not thinking like it's not competition, but I think Sony Bend can learn a lot.
Absolutely.
So, if you think, again, we don't know what they're working on. It's way too early for them to announce it. Well, who knows? Knowing Sony, sometimes they announce it too early. But, if they were working, let's say, on a Days Gone 2, if they're like, well, listen, they probably got their hands on Ghosts a little way earlier than most of us, and they're like, I like this, I like this, and they can incorporate some of the small things into
take some notes.
Their next game and take their notes and borrow help, because these companies help each other behind the scenes. I mean, just look at Death Stranding's credits. So it's going to be exciting to see what they learn.
Yeah, and I was going to say Guerrilla too, but at the same time, Guerrilla's so established that in many ways they kind of set the stage for Ghost to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, though I would say they're probably inspired by seeing Ghost and being like, oh, they did a really good job, I have no doubt that in many ways, Sucker Punch looked at Guerrilla and was like, that's what we're trying to achieve. They kind of inspire one another, and they all kind of build off each other. And in many ways, you could say that Guerrilla, in many ways, was inspired by Naughty Dog. So, the good thing about this Sony ecosystem is a lot of people like to critique them for, which is a lot of the same quote unquote same style of game, the third person action games.
Mm-hmm.
The good thing about that is there's a sense of continuity, so they each improve one another. And you could say, yeah, Days Gone is like a dip in quality, but in many ways, Sony Bend was a handheld team that made an immense jump into the console space, inspired by their contemporaries, and they're only going to get better from there. So that's a great thing about the Sony ecosystem, is that they feed off each other and they inspire one another, and they're releasing experiences on a level that we're not really seeing anywhere else. So I got to commend them. Another hit for Sony. Shout out them. I am by no means a Sony fanboy, but you got to give credit where credit is due, and they've snapped this generation. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like this. Nintendo's had their runs before. Microsoft certainly has had their runs. But man, Sony, the PS4 run of exclusives is just astronomical. Like, it's incredible what they were able to do, and what a way to end a generation.
it just has me so excited for what's to come, because like you said, they feed all, they learn off each other, not necessarily feed, but yeah, they learn off each other. We saw what God of War, the PS4 God of War, you saw everything, all the cues they took from The Last of Us, from down to even the camera aspect and stuff. And that's, like you said, it's stuff that goes around. Like, well, we can improve this. Ghost of Tsushima doesn't play that way. You don't, you're not on Jin's shoulder with a partner talking it up all the time. It's way more open and free and stuff like that. So they know who to talk to. They know who to work with, and they know who to really keep their eyes on and learn from. And that's something, like you said, that you really don't see it in too many other party, especially, you have to really compare it to, Microsoft and Nintendo, which, Nintendo's games are a completely different story. They play way different, obviously, from even each other.
Whole different game, yeah.
Yeah, and Microsoft's taking a completely different approach. So to have something that still feels so, great, and, I think that was even the PS4's thing, was greatness, so, weights or whatever it was. And it just has me so excited for PS5. What are these people doing now with, here's all this new hardware? What tales are you going to tell us now? Because this generation was something I would have never expected. I expected a beefy PS3, graphically and stuff like that. And it's not that. It gave me things I didn't expect. So I can only imagine what, Ghost now has, the right in saying that they helped develop these inspire these PS5 games that are gonna come, and I can't wait for that.
Yeah, and just to wrap it up, who would have thought that the Killzone Shadowfall machine was gonna give us this by the end? Talk about a change! Holy crap!
Yeah, because that was the only Sony exclusive at launch, correct?
Yeah, I believe so. In terms of first party release, yeah.
Yeah, knack. Whoever makes that.
Yeah, we don't talk about that, all right? But yeah, man, all right. That was an awesome spoiler cast. And again, for you guys who are listening, if you guys enjoy our spoiler cast, be sure to let us know down in the comment section below on YouTube. And we'll be doing spoiler casts for pretty much every major game that can do it. So we're probably going to do a spoiler cast on Miles Morales, Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. We're going to definitely do it into next gen going forward, obviously that. I would like to do one for Halo Infinite once that's out too. Of course, we're fair here. And yeah, so yeah, we got more episodes coming for you guys.
Yeah, like you said, Halo Infinite's going to be a fun one. We might have smaller ones for other games. But yeah, Halo Infinite, probably Miles Morales. Like I can co-sign that. We're definitely going to talk Miles Morales.
No doubt. Come on, man.
So it's gonna be a nice, and who knows? There's maybe other things that may not have been announced yet. We're still in this summer of gaming thing, so who knows what else? So we'll be here talking about it for sure. Yes,
for you guys who are long awaiting the Sonic Forces sequel, be patient. It is coming. Till next time, this is the Neo Vintage Podcast. Love you guys. Bye.
Take care.